Hello, everybody. My name is Aaron Knoll, and welcome back once again to another edition of the movie Battleground. Today, we have two players who are returning. They got the same record. They uh, have had very similar opponents and experiences in the past, and I'm curious to see how they play off against each other. We have Mr. Shannon Briggs taking on Malcolm Lay, two guys who are both currently one win, two defeats. And they've had some tough matchups. Both have gone to the blind round more than once, I believe. So it's been an interesting experience for both of them thus far. Obviously, Malcolm has been around a lot longer. He has a lot more of that experience, but Shannon has put up some tough fights early on, so we'll see which one will prevail here. So with that said, I'm going to get going and introduce the competitors. Introducing first, with a record of one win, two defeats, he is Malcolm Lay. Malcolm, welcome back, sir, to the Battleground. How are we doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Just ready to go, really.
Yeah, fair enough. And so the last time you were here, obviously, it didn't quite end the way that you would have wanted it to. But is there anything you could kind of take from that to put into your performance this time going into tonight?
Um, Not really. I don't come into these expecting to win. I come into to have fun and talk movies, which is always the main thing of these. Uh, but yeah, I'm always here to see what happens. And I never really sort of look at my last match going, what could I have done better?
Hey, man, listen, everybody's got a reason for being here. We certainly talk movies, so I'm glad I can deliver that. And I mean, well, my instinct is to offer help when you say you come in never expecting to win. That is the way to avoid disappointment. So I guess there is a positive to that. But it's always great to have you here, Malcolm. So I'm going to sit you in the back for just a moment and introduce your opponent. Well, also with a record of one win, two defeats, he is Mr. Shannon Briggs. Shannon, welcome back, sir. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good, Aaron.
Absolutely, man. And kind of the inverse question for you, you're coming into this off the back of getting your first win in the league after two kind of tough defeats back to back. How are you feeling now that you have that win under your belt going up against someone like Malcolm, who's got a little more experience, obviously?
Well, yeah, I feel relief that I was able to get my first win. It was necessarily easy, like most of these movie regular rounds have been. It wasn't necessarily the easiest one, but yeah, but I know, yeah, Malcolm, I'm aware of. He's got a lot more experience as far as like this, and but like I said, I'm looking forward to this. Like I said, having a debate and and just see, like, once the dust settles, who's the best man.
All right, absolutely, man. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Malcolm in, guys, and we'll go ahead and get this match started. Movie Battleground is a best of 5 rounds. It is the first to 3 points wins the match. Each round is worth 1 point. If a competitor happens to get 3 points in a row, that will be a victory by knockout. If it is a 2-2 tie at the end of 4 rounds, we do have a fifth round. It is called the blind round. We'll deal with that should we have to. In terms of how the actual debates work, each competitor was given their questions ahead of time. They've had a chance to put some arguments together as much as they possibly can and come into it ready. They will each get 1 minute to open their arguments. That'll be followed by 2 minutes of solo speaking time to expand on those arguments. There will be a 4 minute open discussion debate where they'll politely trade blows back and forth and try and get their points in. And then they will each get 60 seconds to round out the fight. At the end of all of that, I have three great judges backstage, and Kevin Poss, Noah McCausland, and Richie Goodacre. They will join me on screen, at which point, based off of what was said in the arguments, they will make a deliberation as to who won the round. With all that said, though, guys, are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So we'll go ahead and get into it. And we are going to start in what is probably the most populous genre of film, the action film. Something that is so hard to get right and honestly so easy to fuck up. I feel like if you really run the numbers down, there's more bad ones than good ones. But when the good ones are good, you have to give them credit. So the question here is, what is the best action franchise of the 2000s? And I want to specify here because when people hear the answers, they may take a little bit of step back with these answers because they're not your traditional action franchises. However, anything that does have action and is defined as such online is what we consider action. So they do count. The only clarification is that they must have had 2 or more entries released between the years of 2000 and 2009. Now, with that said, behind the scenes, these guys obviously have very, very similar records. However, based on the slight stats of the fact that Malcolm or Shannon is the one to have a more recent win. He was deemed the favorite going into tonight's match. He chose to go first on questions 1 and 3, which means Malcolm will be going first on 2 and 4. So Shannon, as I pull in the timer, it will start ticking once you begin speaking, sir. Best of luck to the both of you guys.
My pick is a franchise that was from a series of fantasy books that was considered unfilmable and live action at the time. One of the main reasons was it was considered unfilmable was that the books contained were huge, elaborate battles with various creatures that had never been seen in film before. The director that was chosen to helm such an enormous project might not have been primarily known for action, but was a huge fan of the books. That director was Peter Jackson, and the film series was Lord of the Rings. Throughout the 3 film series, there are action sequences that have never been witnessed in such a fantastical scale of beautiful blended practical and CG effects that would foretell the future of fantasy action films. And then that's why I'm choosing The Lord of the Rings as the best action franchise of the 2000s, and I will concede the rest of my time.
All right, so The Lord of the Rings is the first option up on the board. Malcolm, when the timer hits 0, you can begin speaking.
All right. So, what I picked the Nolan Batman trilogy because it's really good, and when it comes to action, like there's action all through all the movies. Well, yes, Dark Knight Rises wasn't that well received, but I personally still think it's a solid movie. And I think it's one of those ones that really gets underrated a lot. But it's just one of the but yeah, I'll go more about it later on.
All right. Go ahead and jump the timer forward. Shannon, when it clicks over to 0, you can begin speaking. 2 minutes.
I'll begin with the Fellowship of the Ring. After the main characters and plot are established, Jackson expertly glides the film to become one prolonged chase sequence, with the Fellowship running from the forces of Sauron. It crescendos with the group fleeing from the Balrog, and it's one of the tensiest action sequences ever put on film. In the Two Towers, the siege, the Battle of Helm's Deep, contains wonderful moments of Legolas doing action maneuvers with a bow and arrow, and Aragorn with a sword that have never been equaled. You can see how the fight choreography in the series was the genesis for such other well-regarded franchises later on, such as the Planet of the Apes films trilogy, and then of course the MCU. The final action sequence in Return of the King during the Battle of the Black Gate was a clear inspiration for the final battle in Avengers Endgame. I feel like the problem with Christopher Nolan's the first 2 Batman films, that you can see that Nolan never was able to photograph the facial mechanics of a fight scene or an action sequence, because most of the fight scenes in those films are shot and edited choppily. You really have no sense of geography. While the Lord of the Rings films tell a story with each action set piece and are memorable, the first 2 Nolan Batman films only have one great action set piece. I mean, arguably the semi-armor chase, car chase in The Dark Knight. However, upon closer look, you can see that the choppy editing it's really detrimental to that sequence. And other than problems with it, it's like crucial elements to the story, like the fights between Batman Rise of Ghoul and Batman Begins, and Batman and the Joker in The Dark Knight, are usually so made so dark and hard to follow that the viewer is lost, and the impact of them sequences have pretty much disappear. Whereas even with thousands of people and creatures in a battle sequence, the Lord of the Rings films have emotional impact. We could Boromir's death and Eowyn's slaying of the Witch King is just a few examples of that.
All right, and that will be time. Malcolm, back over to you, sir. 2 minutes on the clock.
But yeah, first of all, when it comes to Lord of the Rings, using it against me is really mean and cruel for having me fight against it. But that being said, just I am from New Zealand, so but that being said, look, I love Lord of the Rings. That is no secret, but it's one of those ones that even though I get that it's accepted and I get that it's judges action online, I'm not going to get into the whole semantics of that. When you add up all the action sequences in the whole 9-hour trilogy, there's probably comes to about like an hour and like only about half of it is action. There's a lot of walking around and going to the ring and traveling. Like to me, it's more of just a fantasy adventure movie as opposed to an action movie. When it comes to the Dark Knight trilogies, like um all the action sequences I think are really well done. Like you've got action sort of from the start to the end. There is a small moments of levity and small moments of just not action and talking and all that, but for the most part, a lot of the movie is action. And I think when most people think of an action movie, they're thinking of action from start to finish, essentially. Um, and yeah, I can see this much time. I'll get more into that into the
Okay. All right, I will skip it ahead there. One more should do it. Yep. All right. So once it hits 0, you guys can begin the open discussion round. As a reminder, as always, be respectful of each other's time. Don't hog the whole time. Give each other a chance to speak. That said, the timer will continue when the first person speaks.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I mean that Lord of the Rings. I mean, there's like, I mean, there might be like there's, I mean, where their links and stuff, they have time with characters and stuff as far as like knowing like what's going on with the story. It's kind of set up, but then when it does unleash the action, and I would say the Lord of the Rings film, as far as like action for a fantasy type film, was. I mean, they probably set a gold standard for it that's been duplicated by several other franchises years to come. So, but as far as like the Dark Knight movies, I mean, like I said, I think they like again, like I think Christopher Nolan was new as far as like understand how to do a certain like kind of like action scenes and how to stage like action enough. He has a good tone as far as like the films and stuff, but I feel like it just kind of as far as like saying it's an action movie, I don't really think you can name a whole lot of like good action beats in them two films.
I mean, to be fair, if you're going to sort of go, oh yeah, Christopher Nolan's first time doing it, this was Peter Jackson's first time doing action as well. So I mean, like essentially, it's both our director's first time sort of playing in action, and I think it's when it comes to action, it's definitely one of those polarizing things because there's many different styles when it comes to filming action. There is the style of sort of having clean big scale battles and all that, but then there is the whole like if you want to have your action scenes seem more frenetic and more exciting, then I think Nolan's style works really well for that kind of style of action, and I think he does really good like of making it seem like the quick shots and that just to make it seem like this action is more spectacular than what it maybe actually be on set.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I just what I was saying. I think I feel like, but feel like it does that one set of like kind of like the tone and action. Whereas I mean, it doesn't feel like super like as far as like it has its style, but I feel like like I said, where the Lord of the Rings film, especially like they kind of concentrate in different kinds of like action. Like the whole like I said, the final part of Fellowship Ring is just one big long action sequence that I mean. Like you really like that was so like detailed and intricate. It is surprised. I mean, to consider Peter Jackson it was the first film, but I feel like he was kind of able to kind of grip kind of that. He was that kind of action. His action with the fantasy, he was able to kind of work with better than what Nolan was with the first two Batman films.
Yeah, I mean, look, when it comes to Lord of the Rings, I think Peter Jackson wasn't probably looking at it as an action movie per se. I think he was just looking as like, well, I really love these movies. How can I bring all this action set pieces to life? Look, when it comes to the non-Batman movies, I think you pointed out that whole freeway car chase scene is a really well done action scene. It's that just highlights all the actionness and all that. even keeping up the suspense of it is just really good. And yeah, I mean, when it comes to Lord of the Rings, I don't want to be that guy who gets to repeat myself, but it's essentially a adventure movie, a small amount of action. But that being said, Batman trilogy is action from start to finish. But yeah.
Well, I feel like that was with the Lord of the Rings, he's able to have that action piece, but he's also able to kind of balance it with like more of a story. Like understand like different bits of the story, like with Frodo and Sam, where are not like traditional action, but you are feeling tension throughout the journey of them and them characters, as well with what else going on with the other characters is too.
And that will be time. We're going to go on to the closing arguments. Shannon, you are up first, sir. You have 1 minute left on the clock.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Nolan's Batman films are great in many ways. I mean, the acting. I mean, we could go on days about as far as like the acting and the world that Nolan did create as a Batman film is stellar. But however, I feel like that series' major weakness is not with crafting enough memorable action sequences because of the choppy and bad editing. Like we said, we only really kind of like brought up like really one like significant thing from them films, where I think Batman Begins really has a problem with a lot of the action set pieces it tries to set up. And I feel like them disorientation of how Nolan's films film action and set pieces does them film to huge disservice. While the Lord of the Rings have influenced countless other fantasy and how to film action set pieces that form an emotional investment for the viewer. All about seeing the Lord of the Rings films are perfect encapsulations of how to do action and fantasy, while no films show limitations of him crafting scope of action set pieces.
All right. That'll be time on the argument for Shannon. Malcolm, you have 1 round left when you begin speaking, or 1 minute left. Either way.
Look, when it comes to Lord of the Rings, the action set pieces are great, but it's not enough to say that Lord of the Rings is primarily an action movie. Like all in all, the action set pieces probably can encompass maybe about 1 to 2 hours max of a 9-hour franchise. Well, when it comes to the Nolan Batman movies, look, while the action may be choppy, I think it works for a superhero movie who's constantly moving a lot, and you've got action essentially from start to finish, pretty much. Like, you've got minimal moments of no action, but for the most part, the action is primarily most of the movie.
All right, and that is going to be time on the round, guys. Good starting opening debate. I'm going to go ahead and set you in the back and bring our judges in. So there's no real fact checking. However, there is a kind of clerical error that I want to make clear is not a mistake on the competitors. It is on me. So the original intention wording of the question, as you guys can see, was that the films were meant to be set between 2000 and 2009. Now, obviously, Malcolm picked the Dark Knight series, which does include a film that comes in 2012. Based on previous iterations of the question, that film should have been excluded. However, I went back and read the chat to see how I spoke, and that is on me for not making that clear to him, which is why it was brought up today. So I would like to say that any defense of his film that he may have used in it, you can use as a part of his argument, even though the question didn't infer it. But similarly, in a separate message, Shannon asked me for clarification on the question, and I gave him the correct ruling of how it's supposed to be done, which is why he did not directly reference The Dark Knight Rises himself. So I just want it to be clear that in your decisions, anything that Malcolm said, you can use as a plus towards him, but I don't want you to hurt Shannon necessarily for never directly referencing the movie because he was told that it should not have been involved. That is an issue on me. Thankfully, I feel like it was probably one of the least mentioned movies in the argument in general. But I did just want to put that out there for anyone, either you guys or people watching at home. That's not an issue between either of them. It's a clerical error on me for not making that clear to everybody and allowing it to go on. So with that said, Kevin, you are up first, sir. I will go to you. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
This is a good one. Shannon is going to get my vote. He came out of the gate very strong, and that's where it really sold me. Both battles, Helms and Black Gate, are excellent displays of the fight choreography. The emotional plot line that's sewn in there, that was another good point that he made. Plus, I think he was able to excellently rebound versus Malcolm's, saying it's not primarily action, it's only 2/9 action. He's able to rebound and say that the fantasy elements plus the action give it more story. So I give my vote to Shannon on this.
All right. And Noah, down to you, sir. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
Well, I don't have a cool little journal like Kevin does, but I'm going Shannon as well. Just because I felt a little more convinced that the Dark Knight series didn't have too many memorable action scenes, whereas Lord of the Rings did. So just based off that and other things, but I'm just going to bring up that argument. I'm going to go Shannon.
All right. Guys, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and sit you in the back, and we will go ahead and move into the next question as I bring our competitors back in. And we'll go ahead and move into question number 2, which is focused on a gentleman who has been in the limelight quite recently. Obviously, he just had probably one of the biggest releases of the summer in Thor: Love and Thunder. We know that he has another movie coming up called Next Goal Wins, which is currently on hold due to forced reshooting due to one Army Hammer. Thank you, sir, for that. So with that said, though, Taika Waititi is a director who really hasn't made many missteps. In fact, I think we could all argue that one of the biggest missteps of his career was being in Green Lantern as an actor, which says a lot about him as a director. So the question on hand here is, what is the best movie directed by Taika Waititi? He's got a lot to choose from. We have some great ones here today. Here's what I will say. For those of you watching, don't run and cower in fear if you haven't seen it. There are no Thor: Love and Thunder spoilers here tonight. Still close enough that I feel like I should say that. I think it's still only in theaters. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the competitors. Malcolm, you are up first, sir, when you begin speaking.
To be fair, I think we picked these before Full Love and Thunder anyway.
That's true. And my statement could be wrong. We're recording this a few weeks in advance of upload, so it may be out on streaming. I have no clue how this works anymore. Fucking, we could be all sorts of wrong. Anyways, when you're ready, Malcolm.
All right. So so there's many ways I really want to go with this. For best Taika Waititi movie, ultimately, I settled on Hunt for the Wilder People because I think this is a perfect words fail me. It's a perfect blend of Taika's humor as well as him bringing the emotions out in this movie, because essentially it's like the main plot of the movie is this boy gets sent to a foster family and was in foster care, and he's left in the care of Sam Neill, and yeah, it's just a good adventure, and I'll get more to that later.
All right, so Hunt for the Wilder People is up first. Shannon, when the clock rolls over to 0, you can go ahead and begin speaking.
Well, I do not think that it would be an understatement to say that Taika Waititi is an unconventional filmmaker. He has an irreverent and unique sense of humor that he sprinkles in all his films, even even some films that you wouldn't that contains content you wouldn't expect that from. But I believe that his type of sense of humor and his personality is best simplified in What We Do in the Shadows. It's a mockumentary / horror comedy that he co-directed with Jermaine Clement, and it's about the life of a group of vampires living together in New Zealand. And I feel like with its wacky and memorable characters and its play on the vampire lore, that What We Do in the Shadows, I think it epitomizes what we consider a Taika Waititi film, and it's the best directed film by him as well. And I will concede the rest of my time until my next argument.
All right. So we have Hunt for the Wilder People versus What We Do in the Shadows. We'll go ahead and turn it back over to Malcolm. You have 2 minutes on the clock when ready.
Yeah. So What We Do in the Shadows is pretty much an extended version of a short movie that he did back in 2005. And it's it's one of those ones that I think the expanding on it really bogs down so and just adds a lot more that was really unnecessary. Look, I'm not saying it's a bad movie because Tiger hasn't really made a misstep when it comes to his directing. But it's because of What We Do in the Shadows is why Hunt for the Wilder People exists, essentially, because Hunt for the Wilder People takes sort of the comedy that he did in What We Do in the Shadows and expands on it and gives it a much more thing, because the whole dynamic between Sam Neill and Julian Dennison in this movie is just really good. It's just one of those ones because when him and Heck they're running through the forest, they don't get along. It's because of all this adventure that they didn't them going for the forest. It's how they learn to get along, and I think it's that dynamic which makes Hunt for the Wilder People a much better movie. And I think What We Do in the Shadows is just one of those ones that is a good concept, but it's just one that I don't think it needed to be a 1.5 hour movie, which was based on a really short film. I can say there's some more time.
All right, I didn't want to cut you off just in case. All right, so we will turn it back over to Shannon. 2 minutes on the clock, sir, when you're good.
Why I believe What We Do in the Shadows is what he's best film as a director is that I feel like it challenged him to make a film with a low budget documentary style look, but not to make the effects and the production design look cheap, like a lot of them ones can fall into. I feel like the film does an excellent job of putting you in this world and of supernatural creatures and making you laugh as well as get queasy with like the unexpected gore in certain sequences. The characters that you introduce, Fiago, Vladislav the Poker, and Deacon are hilarious creations by Waititi and Clement, who I feel like really complimented with Taika Waititi as far as co-directing it. Each of them are having their own, the characters in it have their own distinct personality, real relatability. Reese Darby as Antoine, the leader of the local pack of werewolves. That's also like a makeshift support group. Has one of the funniest lines when he keeps every time they get mad or whatever, or at the vampires. He's like, remember, we're werewolves, not swearwolves. And like I said, What We Do in this house legacy is in pop culture continues with the successful FX show, and also Wellington Paranormal that also focuses on the police officers that have bit parts in the film, and that's shown really well. While Hunt for the Wilder People is very enjoyable, I would argue that movie uses focus whenever Neil and Dennison are not the focus of that film. The supporting cast of Hunt for the Wilder People, like Rachel Howes, who's like a regular in a lot of Taika Waititi's films, she plays the child welfare officer, and she's presented so enormously wrong and stupid that it's strange to believe that it becomes like the caricature. That's kind of the main problem of the film. The supporting characters are one and unmemorable, and unlike What We Do Shadows, that allows its supporting characters to shine through, and that's why I feel like it really has the edge over Hunt for the Wilder People.
All right, and that's going to be time. We're going to go ahead and go into the 4-minute open discussion. The timer will start when the first competitor speaks.
See, I really disagree with you there. The supporting characters of Hunt for the Wilder People are really memorable. Like, Paula is probably one of the memorable characters there, because like just her following Rick and all around and just the interactions that she's had with Ricky is great. And then you've also got Reese Darby in this as Psycho Sam and as a conspiracy theorist, who is probably one of his better roles ever in a movie. And it's great. Like a lot of the like I forget that werewolves are part of what we do in Shadows because they're not memorable.
I mean, I feel like the whole thing with like Rachel House is kind of like a cliche as far as like the character whenever people are on like a manhunt, or you have that one person that's always so damn determined to go after him that they're so wrong or whatever. And I feel like Taika Waititi, he could have been use that character as a good way to kind of play off that kind of cliche trope or whatever, but it doesn't really. I don't think he really does anything as far as like to subvert that or whatever. And yeah, I mean, Reese Darby is I would consider a New Zealand as a national treasure as far like he livens everything that he's in. But I feel like his like that's a good like little cameo or something as that. But where I feel like what we can do in the shadows, like again, it's like it plays off all this kind of like it's the war between werewolves and vampires and stuff. It's like inherent dislike or whatever, and kind of like where he's having like basically a support group trying them to keep their primal urges from come back whenever the vampires are starting to really kind of they start bullying them or whatever and make fun of them. And it's really funny seeing about how I'm just trying to hold their anger or whatever to and against the vampires and stuff.
Yeah, but that's the thing with Harmful people like just going back to Rachel House's character, like I mean like it's one of those ones that it may not play the same to people outside New Zealand, but it's one of those ones that and just like with a lot of Taika's movies, a lot of that humor and stuff plays into New Zealand sensibilities. Like Rachel House's character is really pretty accurate when it comes to a child welfare officer sort of and the links that someone would go to try and find the kid, especially if they feel like they've been either mistreated or the initial person who signed on either passed away or that, and they need to go back into foster care for whatever reason. But yeah.
But yeah, I like to say, I mean, about that. But I was gonna say, focus on like the other characters. I feel like you were saying about like saying that this film didn't first of What You Shadows didn't add more than what this or add too much what the short did. I mean, I would argue that people were really liked it, like this look at this world or whatever. Like I said, I feel like the success of like what it spawned with this shows, spin-off shows that people are really interested in like looking at humorous ways of like throughout like supernatural creatures and kind of like it's kind of day in the life kind of way of how they interact with each other and stuff like that. And I feel like he really kind of hit a nerve as far as like the being able to like show how ridiculous but also like how endearing these characters that could be scary or like the otherwise, but they're very like personable and have personable problems that we can completely sympathize with.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones like, well, yes, the success of What We Know in Shadows may have spawned into TV series a little bit too late, in my opinion. But and I'll let Tom on out actually.
Yeah, that will be time. We'll go on to the closings. Malcolm, you are up first, though, so you can just continue. I'll make sure you get those 2 seconds back.
But yeah, look, you say that the side characters in Hunt for People aren't memorable. I don't think they're supposed to be. The whole part of the movie is supposed to be the dynamic between Sam Neill and Julian Dennison. That is the whole crux of the movie. And it's all about their relationship and them sort of learning about each other, sort of going through the bush and sort of helping each other survive and all that. So I think it's fine that the side characters aren't that memorable. Like, well, yeah, Cycle Sam and Rachel House are two of the greatest. But for what they're doing in Shadows, it's a really extended short, which isn't really needed. well, yes, it succeeded in TV shows, but ultimately the hot movie, which is what we're talking about, it just loses a bit with the whole extended part of this short.
All right, and that will be timers. Just a little drunk trying to catch up there. Shannon, I will go back over to you, sir. You have 1 minute left on the clock. Time starts when you begin speaking.
Well, yeah, I mean, 100 Word Pillar, I mean, is a very good film, and I mean, like as far as like the main two leads of it, I mean, Julie Nielsen and was a great discovery for Taika Waititi and Sam Neill. They have really great dynamic, but I feel like that's the main thing it has going for it. I mean, once you leave from them two main characters and you focus on the like these little sidetracks and stuff like that, it kind of loses a lot of it. And I feel like whereas what we do in the shadows, again, it has like subplots for even like characters you wouldn't necessarily expect, like for familiars and stuff like that. The Jackie has a whole like about how she's unappreciated by the vampires and logistical problems that rice for cleaning out after they kill people. And like Hunter doesn't have those like subplots that enrich older characters like what we do in Shadows do. And I feel like that's the main thing. Like I say again, it's like Taika Waititi was really like it's a pulse as far as like type of humor that he can integrate into any kind of situation.
All right, guys, that'll be time at the end of the round. I'm going to go ahead and sit you guys in the back and bring in our judges. Once again, these guys had pretty much everything straight, not a lot to really look up or check here. So I'm going to go to Noah. Who gets your vote, and what was your main selling point?
Malcolm's going to get it for me. I feel like he was able to counter a lot of what Shannon had to say, but also his kind of knock, what we do in the shadows, is a 130-minute stretched out version of a short film that didn't need to be made. So,
all right. So we'll go down to Richie for next. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
Yeah, I've also got Malcolm. I think what he really got it for me when he talked. I think his counterpoint of how the supporting characters and Hunt for Wilder people don't really need to be more important, because it's about the journey between Julian Anderson and Sam Neill, Ricky, and yeah. So I think Shannon struggled to counteract that, so that's why Malcolm's got my vote.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and sit you in the back as the score is now all tied up. We'll go ahead and bring the competitors in and move on to question number 3. And we are moving over to the world of James Bond, which is currently, as we're all aware, in a flux right now. Latest that has been said on the franchise is that by the end of this year, they will begin looking for their next Bond, with the hope of announcing it either at the tail end of this year or early next year. But that they wanted to give some breathing room from No Time to Die first before they really even begin thinking about who should replace him. So let's give that breathing room as well, and let's focus on the past. And let's go to the era that was before Mr. Daniel Craig. The question is, what is the best James Bond film of the Dalton or Brosnan era? So there's 6 films on the table for these gentlemen to pick from, 2 James Bonds. Which one was the best of that late 80s into the 90s, I guess technically into the early 2000s as well, stretch of Bond films? And Shannon, you are back up first on this one, so I'll bring the timer up for you. And when you are ready, it'll begin.
For much of the early 1990s, James Bond franchise was considered lagging and behind the times and in need of an upgrade to keep it from like becoming a relic as far as like in the action genre and that it was in. And I feel like 1995's GoldenEye not only revolutionized the action genre, the appearance of Pierce Brosnan as 007 melded perfectly with the film that modernized James Bond successively. It has maybe one of the best openings to a Bond film ever, and some of the best supporting performances in any Bond film at that time. Like I said, it was. I feel like it was one of again, as far as like the quintessential James Bond films and the quintessential James Bond performance by Brosnan. That it's just some of the main reasons why I believe it's the best James Bond film in the Dalton Brosnan era, and I will see the rest of my time.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move over to Malcolm. Once the timer turns, it'll start again when you begin speaking.
Yeah, so I went a little bit earlier. I went for License to Kill. I think this is the best James Bond movie, just because I think my personal favorite is Craig, but I think after that I think Dalton is the second best Bond. I think he managed to sort of encapsulate the suaveness of Bond and getting into action all the same, and I think it's just one of those that I think he does a really good job. I think and yeah, I'll get more into that.
All right. I'll go ahead and skip it forward just a little bit. Shannon, when it turns back over, we have GoldenEye versus License to Kill. You have 2 minutes on the clock.
Yeah, as far as like GoldenEye, I mean, I feel like like Pierce Brosnan, like like his performance in it is like it shows just how like that film and that time, how perfectly it fit. It's perfect casting. And I also feel like with the first casting, the role of M, it was given to Dame Judi Dench, who I believe is the best version of that character that has ever been on film. The film has great films by Sean Bean and Famke Janssen, and I think what's so great as Sean Bean's performance is Alex Trevelyan is that in many ways he is the mirror image of Bond in intellect and skill, and yet it's jealousy that fuels his contempt for Bond. We consider Famke Janssen seeing it on the top. It's one of the best female Bond films of all time. As far as the opening I talked about earlier, I mean, it begins with James Bond basically jumping over the 700 foot from the Contra Dam and ends with Bond. He's jumping from a motorcycle to an airplane, like a lot of fairly in-depth stunts. Going to have to press the most elaborate tank chase ever at the time. The problem with License to Kill is it's an elaborate exploitation film that's dragged down by being a Bond film. David Douglas is an underrated action star, but something is just off in his portrayal as Bond. He seems so uneasy at delivering the quips that Brosnan so effortlessly delivers in GoldenEye. License to Kill was directed by John Glenn, who had directed the previous 4 Bond films. And it's not surprising when you look at it back at them that them Bond films are considered pretty much the more unremarkable entries in the franchise. In contrast, Martin Campbell's direction fits perfectly with GoldenEye, with fantastic set pieces that keep the film exciting from beginning to end. And I feel like Robert Davi in Sean Bean's film for his Robert Davi in Film Like Hero is just a generic juggler film that is in like every other 80s action movie.
All right, and that is going to be time. We're going to go back over to Malcolm. 2 more minutes.
Yeah, so when it comes to Brosnan, I actually think his scripts don't come out really well. I think Dalton delivers the scripts a lot better. But that's all subjective, really. But when it comes to License to Kill, I think you've got a whole bunch of great casts here as well. Like Benicio del Toro's here is in a small role, and like you've got Kerry Laurel and Robert Darby. I think they really do a good job in these movies. And yeah, I think when it comes to License to Kill, I think it's one of those ones that I think does really well because at with the gadgets and that as well, because I think the gadgets are more memorable in License to Kill. I think when it comes to GoldenEye, it's a more memorable video game, but I think the movie is not good. I yield the rest of my time.
All right. And we will go ahead and jump it forward. Almost there. There we go. It was almost damn perfect. All right. We're going to go into the 4-minute open discussion. The timer will start when the first competitor speaks.
Yeah, I would just go because here, like I said, I feel like License to Kill I mean, for an '80s action movie, like I said, it feels like a lot of how Bond films in that time would just kind of copy different like the genres that were popular, and I feel like License to Kill was really trying to hit that revenge film, action film of the 1980s, and a lot of its plot or whatever, and then whenever it tries to veer more into being the James Bond film, it kind of loses its identity. Whereas I feel like GoldenEye is like the quintessential like melding of like the modern world at the time of the 90s with the character of James Bond, and kind of reinforcing how even M says like how much of a dinosaur that character is, and kind of saying that you kind of like need to modernize yourself to be able to be relevant in this world. And it, like I said, it's kind of very good like kind of like interaction as far as like that themes as far as like that, and I feel like the action and overall is more like distinguishes and stuff like that. It's more memorable than just like the License to Kill. It kind of like borrows a lot of its action from like the 80s action that it's kind of copying with the plot.
See, I don't think that's a bad thing, because if you, I'm going to take a quick sidetrack to the MCU for a minute. A lot of their movies are basically like Winter Soldier is a spy thriller and hidden as a superhero movie. But so it's not a bad thing that the Bond movies may have done a whole bunch of taking a type of action movie and going, how can we make this work for Bond? And I think they took an 80s action movie or revenge movie, I think as you put it, and I think they made it work for License to Kill. And I think putting James Bond in that scenario, I think really works. I think when it comes to GoldenEye, I think the modernizing it and trying to move with the times, I think worked a little bit, but I think ultimately that's kind of where it also felt as well, as they're trying so hard to modernize it. But
Well, see, I feel like again, like I said, I feel like if you feel like the License to Kill kind of like where it's used in like that as a action genre of that time as a strength or whatever. I feel like GoldenEye really like revolutionized as far as like its action set pieces and stuff like that. Where I feel like other films that did action and spy films like future Mission Impossible movies were kind of like had to step up their game to kind of compete with how like with GoldenEye, where like, again, as far as like I said, like as far as like the James Bond films like before or whatever, they were kind of like they were considered maybe solid enough action films or whatever. But like I said, even like with Timothy Dalton, like with as far as like License to Kill, it kind of like it wasn't strong enough the reaction or whatever to from the audience and as far as like or anything to really like feel like they could like continue more going that same way of trying to like kind of do their own version. I mean, it works with the MCU, but I don't think not quite with the James Bond. I mean, it kind of depends your taste as far as like the more movies, if you like the cheese or not. But I feel like the Daltons are super serious enough that they kind of like blend with this kind of they're trying to do the Roger Moore sensibility with a different kind of sensibility that doesn't work with that when it tries to do some of the more cheesier elements with License to Kill.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones that because I think ultimately when you're comparing 80s and 90s action in general, there's going to come to a very different aim. As some people like more 80s action, some people like more 90s action. So this is what this debate essentially is. And yeah, I don't really have much more to say, and that's going to take 2 seconds.
And that's time. All right, so we have 1 minute left on the clock for both of you. Shannon, you are up first.
Okay, I mean, yeah, License to Kill was made in the late 80s, but I mean, it might as well come out in the late 70s as far as the plot, villains, and the lack of evolution and the action set pieces that it showed at that time. But GoldenEye, however, I feel like I said, the action set pieces had immense effect on the action genre throughout the remainder of the 90s and into the 2000s. And like I said, again, it has memorable characters. Again, like I said, feel like a successful game. Again, that uses that plot or whatever and stuff. And it says help reinvigorate the James Bond movie and the spy genre and revenue because of it. And like I said, as far as like the characters, again, you were bringing up Carrie Lowell. I will say about she's kind of introduced as a kick-ass thing, but then she kind of gets sidelined as again the generic Bond law defenders, where I feel like Isabella Skripal, she is presented as a smart and capable and necessary ally to Brosnan throughout the film, and their romantic chemistry I feel is more better explored than Dalton and Lowell's. And like I said, it's just one with better strengths for that film.
And time. All right, Malcolm, back over to you. 1 minute left on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to License Skill, I think it has more memorable action set pieces, and I think it's one of those ones. I think it makes the whole 80s action vibe work within the realm of James Bond. I think with GoldenEye, I think it's one of those ones that that doesn't it works to a level, but I think it fails to sort of capture 90s action of that time, and I think ultimately it's one of those movies that gets more talked about having a good video game than being an actual good movie. I'd concede the rest of my time.
All right. Go ahead and put you guys in the back as I will bring in our judges. And Richie, I will go over to you first, sir. Who gets your vote and what was the main selling point?
Yeah. Good job by both here. Ultimately, I went with Shannon. I think he had. I just think I heard more takedowns of license and why GoldenEye was the superior film. I think I just heard sort of a bit of counter arguments to Malcolm's point. So I'll go Shannon.
All right. And Kevin, down to you, sir. Who gets your vote and what was the selling point?
I also went with Shannon. His display of the great supporting cast. I think the cast of GoldenEye is better than the cast of License to Kill. And the way he brought out that John Glenn was at the end of his directing career with Bond, and that Martin Campbell was kind of a breath of fresh air with GoldenEye really sold me on this one. So Shannon had a lot of good points.
All right, judges, once again, thank you so much. I'll go ahead and put you in the back, and we will move on to question number 4 for these competitors. And question number 4 is a question that we are torturing you with, not by me, but instead through a submission. Question number 4 is a viewer submitted question. If somehow this is your first time watching a match, I don't know how you're finding the 80th or 90th something match of a debate league that's been going on for a long time, but welcome. If you would like to see a competitor answer any question of yours, you guys can submit it to my email, officialaaroncanola@gmail.com. Please make sure to include your name in the email, because if you are a competitor, there's no way in hell you're getting your own question, and if I don't know who's sending it, then I can't possibly avoid that, can I? So tonight's question is presented to us by Mr. Zach Shelton. You guys already know the question, but for those at home, the question is, what is the worst Marvel film released in the 2000s? We avoided Marvel earlier with that Taika Waititi question. We could have gone into it. Instead, we're going to do it now. So we have it up here. And Malcolm, you are up first, so the timer starts when you begin speaking.
So the worst Marvel film released in the 2000s is easily X-Men Origins Wolverine. First off, Mouthless Deadpool. They completely obliterated the Deadpool character, and luckily he managed to rebound and get his own movies, which were a lot better. But look, there's a really not a lot of good supporting cast. I mean, you've got Ryan Reynolds, but then you've also got will.i.am, who's probably one of the worst castings ever in this movie, playing John Rafe. Hugh Jackman does a good performance, but even his performance in this is not enough to save this movie. It just takes the Wolverine character and just completely obliterates it, essentially.
All right, and that is time. Shannon, back over to you, sir, for your introduction.
Well, before I reveal what my choice is, I'll ask you some hypothetical questions. What do you get when you have an actor so difficult and spiteful against a director who refuses to appear on set, and with said director and other cast members, and the use of CGI stunt doubles is needed for it? Then you have an actor whose line readings sound more like Van Wilder than Deadpool. And what do you get when you have a director that's more suited as a screenwriter? And then what happens when your film action montages are basically just Apple commercials? And what happens when you are the third film in a successful franchise and somehow your visual effects have devolved since then? And also, what happens when your big bad Dracula is played by the physical involvement of wood? You get the unmitigated disaster and a ruin of a franchise. You get Blade Trinity, the worst Marvel film of the 2000s. And I will concede the rest of my time.
All right, X-Men Origins Wolverine versus Blade Trinity. Yeah, we probably got two of the worst here. I feel definite in saying that. It's up to our judges to decide which one is worse, though. Malcolm, back over to you. You got 2 minutes on the clock when you're ready.
I just find it really interesting that we've both got Ryan Reynolds versus Ryan Reynolds as well. But that being said, look, I looked at various clips of Blade Trinity to prepare for this. I mean, I wasn't really going to try and watch the whole movie, but that being said, some of the clips I've seen, actually I found a lot of fun. Like, Blade Trinity is one of those movies which I think you can have a lot of fun with bad movies sometimes, and it's one that you can have a lot of fun with. There's no way you can have fun with X-Men Origins. Like, when I do an X-Men rewatch, I suffer myself through it just because I want to watch, because it starts off the Wolverine trilogy, which ends in the Better Logan. But it's one that you watch and it's like, why am I watching this? Like, the script itself is not good. Like, the direction is not good. For the most part, outside of Hugh Jackman, all the acting is not good. It's just like everyone's just sitting there, sort of, can I go home now? Type of acting. And once again, what they do with Ryan Reynolds by taking Deadpool and just taking away his mouth, when he's known as the mute for the mouth, is just almost unforgivable in my opinion. At least with Blade Trinity, like, well, yes, it may have been a troubled production and all that. Like, they had to sort of do a lot of workarounds in there. At least what was done is a movie you can have a lot of fun with, and maybe make a drinking game out of it. And I think Triple H is not that bad in the movie.
All right, that will be time. We'll go back over to Shannon.
Well, you know who didn't have fun making Blade Trinity? Wesley Snipes, because many accounts he would hate being part of it, and you can tell by his lifeless performance he gives throughout the film. And he allegedly would only interact with note cards and would hardly be on set with Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel. So that explains the lack of chemistry between them. If you can get the main actor together in it, and it's only compounded because of it. So, and the plot is so one-note and lazy, considering the main villain is Dracula. And who you get to play such a well-known horror icon, Dominic Purcell. And I would say, like, yeah, who? Exactly. I mean, Purcell, it seems like the producers wondered who was the most boring lifeless actor to play Dracula, and Purcell won. And I feel like Ryan Reynolds' line delivery, or so-called quips in this film, is basically what would happen if Deadpool was written by Uwe Boll. The action is so badly edited and choreographed, you can tell when Snipes' double is being used, and the CGI attempts to insert him with other cast members is laughable. Much like it's the PlayStation level visuals and CG that's used. And I would list all the supporting actors and stuff in here. Parker Posey is in this, and she is wasted. Patton Oswalt is in this, wasted. Natasha Lyonne, wasted. We know great actors with right material, but are wasted. It wasted so many talented actors. Say what we feel about X-Men Origins Wolverine, but at least Hugh Jackman is trying as Wolverine, and he's Cyborg is someone who's no part of Blade as a character of a franchise. The Origin at least has Hugh Jackman and Liev Schreiber, who is really actually really good as Sabretooth, and he put more emotion and fun in that character than he has ever had in film. Nobody in Blade Trinity is trying, and it can even be enjoyed ironically like Origins can. I feel like it's more fun than Origins ironically. The 5 minutes of Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson in Origins is cooler and more memorable than his whole performance as Hannibal King in Blade Trinity. It's no doubt without that.
All right, and that's time. Okay, so we're going to get into the 4-minute open discussion. The timer will start when the first competitor speaks.
I know Dominic Purcell is his Heatwave in Legends Tomorrow. And I think he's really interesting as Dracula, and it's one of those ones. There's a Dracula in Marvel Comics is not like supposed to be the same Dracula that is, from the classic horror movies. Anyway, it's a really different interpretation of that fictional character. But that being said, like, when it comes to X-Men Origins, it's just one of those ones that really, is that you struggle to watch. Like, I've only seen Blade Trinity once, but I could sit down and watch it from start to finish all the way through and still find stuff to enjoy about it. Well, yes, Wesley Snipes did cause trouble on set and all that, but it's one of those ones where they still managed to make something out of the troubles on set as well, and I think all in all, it's pretty serviceable.
But I think you can tell the difference between like somebody that cares about their character and somebody who doesn't, and how that affects them. I think, Hugh Jackman, again, like he probably, could realize that the script of this film was definitely not that great or whatever, but at least he is trying. Like, he loves that character enough, and he puts that emotion in that character. Like, he wills that movie with all the crazy stuff and the decisions that makes or whatever, but at least he carries that character enough that you still have that quantitative like care and love of that character, that it doesn't that ruin that character or nothing that's irreplaceable like how Wesley Snipes is with it. And I like Dominic Purcell again. I feel like they had the perfect opportunity to like do something that I care about, how he like people witness Dracula in pop culture now, but they never do with it. He just becomes just just saying these dull monologues in a monotone voice, and doesn't really have much charisma or whatever compared to the emotional aspects of the previous Blade villains at least, and it just kind of drags that film down even more.
I mean, find me a version of Dracula that has any charisma. I think when it comes to Dracula,
Bela Lugosi.
Look, it's one of those ones like every interpretation of Dracula I've seen clips of Bela Lugosi. They've all been that kind of similar note. Like a lot of them, there's many different ways to bring charisma to Dracula. I think. It's just one of those ones, like a lot of when they talk with Dracula, it is a lot of slow and steady sort of dialogue, regardless. But anyway, this is not a debate about Dracula movies.
And you were also bringing about the fact about like Will.i.am. It's about like his performance is like one of the worst. I would say everybody's matching the tone of that film. That tone of the film, whether or not it works or not, is being goofy or whatever. Whereas like with Blade Trinity, it tries to be campy with these different like Parker Posey and like with Ryan Reynolds like jokes or whatever, but it kind of completely like clashes with any seriousness. Like we were about like the whole sub story about Whistler's death and his like having a daughter and stuff, and it kind of like it just like I said, it's a whole like whatever seriousness or like whatever like we're making like this bitter like fight against him and Dracula that's been like leading up to these trilogies. Just amounts to like a big whimper at the end, and it completely brings that movie down.
And time. All right, Malcolm. No, that was the end of the 4 minutes. I'm sorry, I somehow got lost in it of myself. All right, so we have 1 minute left for each competitor. Malcolm, you are up first. I knew I was right somewhere in my own mind. Time starts when you begin speaking.
Yeah. Look, my issue for X-Men Origins, I think Hugh Jackman does a good job of what he's given in X-Men Origins Wolverine. I think he's by far one of the only actors that cares enough about the character to at least try. All the supporting cast in there just feel like they're just there for a paycheck and reading off and just don't really do anything of note. Like even sort of Ryan Reynolds himself, like in X-Men Origins Wolverine, just feels like he just is there. He just doesn't care. But with Blade, like they probably had to make the choice to go campy just to make it seem entertaining, and fun for people to watch, just so people will watch it, forgetting about the trouble production that it had. Because obviously Wesley Snipes was busy running from tax at the time.
And time. All right, and Shannon, back over to you for the final moment.
Okay, X-Men Origins Wolverine is a piece of shit. I mean, that's without question, but it did not kill the X-Men franchise or the popularity of Wolverine. I mean, Jackman was able to have a 10-second cameo in X-Men First Class, and Wolverine was cool again. You can enjoy the film ironically because at least it has memorable parts. I mean, you can laugh at the fire coming back, the explosions and stuff, and like the Roger Rabbit Wolverine claws. But at least that's stuff that's like we can go look back now and laugh at. Whereas, again, like, and like Deadpool, the whole you're saying about the whole ruins of Deadpool, the Deadpool 2 have the funny scenes when they reference how silly it was, so it led to something good at the least. But whereas Blade Trinity didn't just ruin the Blade film franchise, it practically killed it for almost 18 years. The Blade character was no longer cool. Nobody looks back at the film, and not even ironically. Everyone involved is practically disowned it being part of it. Origins is a mess, but at least Gavin Hood was more competent at putting together the action scenes than David Goyer was with Blade Trinity.
And time. All right, guys, a great fourth round there. I'm going to go ahead and set you both in the back to turn it over to our judges for the deliberation. So the only real thing that I could fact check here, and this isn't so much as a fact check as it is the first really interesting thing brought up that I wanted to delve into, is for anyone who didn't know, will.i.am had an acting career that lasted all of 6 years. He cameoed as himself in a handful of films. However, he only has 5 movies in which he actually played a character. He is the voice of the now famously memed Moto Moto in Madagascar 2. He was in a French animated film called Arthur and the Revenge of Maltazard, which is a sequel to a movie Luc Besson made. He was in X-Men Origins Wolverine as Wraith, and he was the voice of Pedro in Rio and Rio 2. He has not acted since, and it's probably for the best. Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir. Who gets your vote, and what is the main selling point?
This one was a fun one. 2 pretty shitty movies, I would say, but and it hurts me to go the way I'm going to have to go on this one because I actually like the movie that I am picking against, I guess you'd say. I'm going to go with Shannon on this one. I just feel like he came out with a lot of ammunition, information about Wesley Snipes being spiteful and all that. I didn't know. So, but I do feel like Liev Schreiber did a pretty good job as Sabretooth in X-Men Origins. And like he said, Jackman still, did will the film, and Deadpool, the references, were funny later on. So we'll see how Blade does, but I do love Blade Trinity, so we'll it is what it is. But I'm going to Shannon.
All right. Oh yeah, I guess that is the other fact from that round is Wesley Snipes is a tax evader, but I feel like we all know that by this point. I don't feel like I have to do that research. It's him and Nick Cage. They are the two. Snipes' career has turned out a lot better, though. Noah, down to you, sir. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
You better watch your mouth, Aaron, because everyone knows that Will.i.am watches this YouTube show. So,
I would love if Will.i.am watches this. That'd be great.
It's crazy that this entire game it hasn't gone to the third judge, and it's not going to start now because I'm going with Shannon as well. Just because I feel like, just like, I don't mean to steal his thunder, but Kevin was talking about he came out with a lot of ammunition, and holy crap, he did. I felt like he had 1,000 things to say about Blade Trinity. And not only Blade Trinity, but Origins as well, which I can't imagine how many good things people have to say about that movie, but he came up with some. So I'm going to have to go with Shannon.
All right. Well, judges, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and sit you in the back because your winner by a final score of 3-1. It is Mr. Shannon Briggs getting a back-to-back win there, sir. How are you feeling after that one? That is now after 2 tough opening matches. Both of them were blind round defeats. You've now pulled out 2 wins back-to-back to kind of push yourself up the rankings. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling well. I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna have to take a really long shower to wash off the stink of trying to defend X-Men Origins Wolverine off my off me for a while, but yeah, otherwise I feel really good. Again, Malcolm, I knew was going to bring it, and he did, and he brought up a lot of very good counter arguments against me, and like I said, it was a very good match. And I just, the fact that I'm able to debate and about certain things, and I guess bring up Blade Trinity from the dead heap of that film came from, to at least kind of inform people about like how much of a disaster that film was. Maybe it's worth it. I don't know, to the few people, the people that will watch this, but
yeah, absolutely, man. And so then in terms of kind of where you go from here, we're starting to reach that point in terms of production where, we're going to have an end of year tournament. Every player outside who doesn't make that top 16 tournament is going to get at least one more match. However, this win tonight puts you in an interesting position because you are within range where, depending on how 1 or 2 more matches shake out, you might snag that 15th or 16th slot in the tournament based on where you're currently ranked. Now, obviously, that would mean that you are facing maybe a tougher opponent than you've ever faced before. Actually, someone you have faced before in Amaru is currently up there towards the top. So it'd be a tougher match, but that is something that's on your plate. You don't have to agree to anything today, obviously. We'll discuss that behind the scenes. But if that offer does come your way, how are you feeling about that, or just kind of the future of what you want to do?
Oh, I'm just saying, considering whenever I had my first match and and stuff, and knowing that like I would at least have a even record at this point would I consider a major win. And as far as like maybe facing Amaru later on, I would just say that I was surprised. Of all people, surprised at my performance at least enough to keep him to keep it to a sudden death match. And I'm just saying, I feel like I've got since then. I've only become more confident in my performance as far as being able to debate. So I'm saying I'm not expecting nothing but a great game against Amaru if we do face our paths meet again.
Absolutely, man. Well, we'll see how things shake out. Either way, the one thing we do know is that you will be back at least one more time before the end of the year. In what capacity that is, we will have to wait and see on some other matchups. But it's a great win for you tonight, and I will see you next time that you are here, sir, as I go ahead and sit you in the back and bring in your opponent. And Malcolm, that was a solid performance, man. I think obviously we joked behind the scenes, but at least in appearance, there was a little more confidence in some of those answers. There was definitely some more facts brought up. We did pitch you against the movies that you made tonight, and I know that was probably a tough thing to have to do right off the bat. But how are you feeling?
As my good friend Zendaya once told me, expect disappointment and you won't be disappointed. Yeah.
You directing that next Spider-Man film, by the way? Is that down?
Oh yeah, totally.
The Long Journey Home.
Exactly. Or an unexpected journey home, but that's still to be decided. But that being said, it's always a lot of fun doing Battleground, just talking about movies and debating it, because I actually do it quite often with my friends anyway. So it's just used to it by now, and yeah.
Absolutely, man. Well, similar as I said to him, unfortunately at this point you are more than likely out of a tournament slot contention, but everybody is going to get at least one more match before the year's over. So do you have anyone in mind in particular, or you'll just kind of take what comes your way?
I'll take what comes my way, because at this point I'm just here to have fun and see what happens.
Well, always like people who like to have fun. There's so many people that care so damn much, man. It's almost annoying. Like, it's just nice to see someone here for some casual, good discussion. And you definitely brought that tonight, Malcolm. Of course, man, you've been here since the beginning, and I'll love that I still have you here. So we'll see you the next time that you are back, as I sit you in the back. And guys, that is it for another movie Battleground match. In the books. Shannon getting a win that could help him potentially find a slot in that tournament. But either way, it's a good little confidence boost for him. And Malcolm still leaving in the high spirits that we expect from him here, and bringing some nice arguments there as well. It was a good matchup. I want to say thank you to my judges behind the scenes, Kevin Post, Noah McCausland, and Richie Goodacre for being here tonight. If this is your first time watching somehow, please rate the video, drop a comment, interact with the channel, and subscribe for more Movie Battleground. Going up later this week, we have the first semifinals match of the Summer Invitational Tournament. We have Will Cohen, who took out Kevin Post to make it to this point, kind of getting in his first chance at going towards a title shot, taking on Jeremy Adams, a man who has been there before. He knows what it's like in those types of games, but just quite hasn't gotten over that top yet to make it to where he needs to be. So we will see who will win in that matchup. And of course, we have only 2 more weeks till that's over. So be sure to tune in, check out that separate playlist on the channel if you have missed some of those matches to catch up. And with that said, on behalf of everyone here at Movie Battleground, my name is Aaron Knoll. We will see you next time. Take care, everybody.